Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, EU commissioners and the Polish government are meeting in Gdańsk as Poland takes on the presidency of the Council of the European Union. At the heart of discussions, European defense spending and migration policy. While European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen calls for stronger collective defense, Prime Minister Donald Tusk had made it quite clear that Poland will not take on additional migration burdens. What does this signal for EU unity? Joining us today on TVP World to discuss is Marta Prochwicz, Deputy Head of the Warsaw Office at the European Council of Foreign Relations. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So, a meeting at the start of the EU presidency is kind of a routine, but I'm also wondering, does this gathering in Gdańsk carry any special significance?
Oh, it definitely does. I think that Gdańsk was definitely not chosen by accident. First of all, that's Donald Tusk's stronghold. Second of all, it is where the Solidarity movement was built. And that holds a very strong meaning for Poland, and that's something that we want to showcase. And third of all, it was where World War II on the 1st of September 1939 started through the full-scale invasion of Poland, and it's remembered by the Poles as the place where European allies, Britain and France, did not come to its security, even though to its help. And I think that may play a strong symbolic meaning here, because we want to show that we want to avoid this situation happening once again.
That's actually very interesting. Even the location being chosen kind of sends a message going forward. Now, von der Leyen has all called for greater joint defense spending. How likely do you think that is to materialize?
I do think it's quite likely. I think that it's very optimistic. The mood is very optimistic with whoever you talk to in the EU, and this is not something that is coming out of the blue. It's something that has been a process for a year and a half now, and there have been several meetings, some of them formal, some of them informal, that are leading up to this very big change and step forward. And this is not the end of it. So the meeting that took place today and yesterday in Gdańsk is only one in a series. I think that it will actually be concluded in June at the European Council meeting, but there will be several more discussions, because the questions that are being asked are about the mechanics of how that might function, whether there's unanimity in the European Union, because it's not traditionally been conceived of as a defense union that can therefore have this sort of authority on countries. So a lot of questions being asked, a lot of things being thought through, and the actual workings of this coming together is probably the biggest unknown of all, but I definitely see that going in that direction right now.
Right, and I think the fact that logistics and the details are being discussed is probably also a very good sign that things are going forward, right? If people don't have the will, then it's just less likely that kind of details are going to be discussed. Now, I'm also wondering, when it comes to defense and shaping Europe's policy going forward, what role can Poland play during its presidency?
Well, first of all, Poland's voice at this time is extremely important, because it represents the view of the entire eastern flank and also of the Nordics and Baltics. It has for a long time been increasing its defense spending, so it's not something that started just now when Donald Trump put it on the table and said, guys, you got to spend 5%. That's not when Poland is thinking, oh, wow, we have to spend. They've been doing that consistently since 2014, so since when actually the war in Ukraine started. Not just since the full-scale invasion. So a lot of countries started at that point, which is great, on February 22nd, 2022. So it's a long-term process that has been going on. That's number one. So Poland has a really strong military position, and it wants to continue to spend that money on defense. And right now, it just has the political credibility in order to carry forward the message about, well, we really have to do this not just because Donald Trump is asking for it, which is one of the reasons, but also we are in a squeeze between Russia and the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, a war going on our continent, and Donald Trump sort of questioning everything that we've built the transatlantic alliance on. So we're really squeezed by those two actors and need to take our strategic position seriously and show that we have not just the political political the capabilities, because we're rich enough to do it. The question is, do we have the political will to act that way?
Right. Now I want to go to a topic that's a little bit more contentious because, well, Prime Minister Tusk does have a quite firm stance on migration, which suggests that Poland will probably oppose the EU migration pact. How is that going to impact EU's cohesion going forward?
Well, I think that that's one of the issues that has actually been a surprise when it comes to Donald Tusk's government. So coming into office, most European countries expected to see a 180-degree turn from what they saw compared to the PIS of the former government in Poland. And obviously, on so many levels, when it comes to democracy, the rule of law, the connections, the relations that we have with many European countries, the approach towards the EU, that's entirely different. But I think that there are a lot of things that could be classified as continuation, actually. So it's a divisive issue. It's not something that goes in line with where the EU stands on the one hand. But let me add that a lot of European countries right now are becoming so much more realistic and pragmatic about the situation. They're listening to the people. The people are saying, this is too much. I mean, Germany is a great example of that, very much moving towards the right wing. So what I think is happening right now, on the one hand, a bit of a surprise for the Europeans that there's a lot of continuity with the new Polish government, but at the same time, it's not unusual for European centrist parties to move to the right. It seems to be a trend all over Europe right now.
Right, like you mentioned, perhaps the administrative level of a lot of the EU leaders hold the stance that's perhaps different from some of the electorate when it comes to the how it's trend during these past election cycles. But do you think this also runs the danger of kind of normalizing the challenge to these sort of EU-wide agreements?
Well, I think it's a problem, especially in terms of the rhetoric. So if we start becoming more right-wing when it comes to migration policy and rejecting asylum seekers, we're moving towards the traditional electorate of the right wing. And at some point, we're not going to be able, as centrist parties and liberal parties, who traditionally did not have this stance, to be as credible as right-wing parties that have been portraying this vision of the world, of this anti-immigration rhetoric for a long time. So I think that that's actually a bargain that might be lost in the long term.
Right, perhaps like you mentioned, with the stance being consistent on the right side of the aisle, and perhaps a little bit of shifting here.
Yeah.
Now, last but not least, looking ahead, I'm also wondering how we can come back to this 6 months later and kind of discuss whether how we define Poland's success or failure during its presidency.
That's a tough one. I think whatever happens with the transatlantic alliance is going to be one thing. So there's right now I think that the most the hot potato issue is what's going to happen with tariffs being potentially imposed, because Donald Trump has sort of signaled. And whatever way the EU is at the European Union level through the European Commission and its ability to fight back when it comes to trade, because it does have that domain under its under how it houses it. That's going to be one test of whether the EU managed to succeed during this time and adapt and sort of respond to Donald Trump's calls.
Right. What about the EU unity? Do you think that this is going to be a good window for it to be strengthened, or do you think perhaps issues like migration will be kind of something that, well, unfortunately would have to drive some of these countries a little bit apart?
There are so many divisions right now in the EU. They're growing with extreme cases and outliers such as Hungary and Slovakia. And I think that in the foreseeable future, due to Donald Trump's personal need to bilateralize these relationships, we're going to see even more division, because he's going to be wanting to strengthen ties with ideological partners, and he has those in Hungary, in Slovakia, and there could be an illiberal internationalist that starts to grow even more within the EU, so that's going to be extremely divisive. And I think that actually defense spending is also also rather divisive. And what we might see is the eastern flank countries and Nordic and Baltic countries, perhaps Germany, being on the same bandwagon, saying that we need to really stand up and develop mechanisms in order to fund EU defense and to support Ukraine, while other countries might want to hold out on that.
Right, so we'll have to see how things turn out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.